McCartney's still out there rocking it. Hey, didn't you see McCartney on stage recently,
he's good.
Phil?
He was good. He was great, even. I saw him like 4 days before his 80th birthday.
Okay. But listen, the difference between 80 and 89 is pretty dramatic.
It's substantial.
There's a lot going on there.
But what about if you've just had baby blood pumped into your veins consistently?
Hello, and welcome everyone to another week of 1001 Album Complaints. This is the podcast where lifelong friends, musicians, and curmudgeons old before their time get together to complain about albums on the list of Robert Dimery's 1001 albums you must hear before you die. Thank you very much for joining us this week on a special spooktacular episode. It is Halloween, everyone, and we are very stoked to be bringing you an album that you might have heard of before. I don't know, it might have crossed your path once or twice in your life. It is the album Thriller by Michael Jackson.
I would just like to note before we get too far into the viewers or to the listeners who can't see me, I am dressed as Fred Durst today in honor of the greatest musician of all time. Hands up now, hands down. What you gonna do now? All right.
I thought the red hat was a Trump thing that you had.
Right.
Yeah, boy. All right. Very shortly, we are going to get into this album, start picking out some tracks and doing deep dives on them, giving you a little background on the artist, on the recording history, all that good stuff. But before we do that, I'm going to throw things over to Rob, who is going to reach his hand into that listener mailbag and pull out some treats. So, Rob, take it away.
Thank you, Tommy. So today we have two bits of listener mail I wanted to go over. One is from Paul, who's coming to us from West Sussex in the UK. And he says, love the way you guys research the albums to add more context. The fact that you're musicians really gives the podcast more depth. It's making me revisit albums I've not heard in a while, and looking at them differently in most cases. So thank you.
Awesome. And same here.
I agree.
That's the nicest thing anyone said to me this year.
That's why we're here. And we got one more that I wanted to mention because it calls back to an old episode. I think one of the group's favorite from the archive. Frankie from Nova Scotia writes, I listened to the Kid Rock episode yesterday.
Oh.
Don't think I've laughed so much during a podcast.
All right.
Nor am I tempted to actually listen to the record.
Mission accomplished. Yes. Don't listen to Kid Rock.
For our listeners who haven't heard that podcast episode, I think the funniest part of that one, I wasn't on it, but Phil listened to the wrong Kid Rock album, which is like doubly terrible.
You're absolutely right. I'm actually looking it up right now so I can tell them the other Kid Rock record.
Grit sandwiches for Christmas.
Oh my God.
I just remember the text from like the day before we're going to record. It was like, this album, Grit Sandwiches for Breakfast, sucks. I'm like, why are you listening to that, Phil? Like,
dude,
what the fuck are you doing?
I'll agree. Yes, it does suck.
I dare you to listen to like the first 45 seconds of that record.
No, I think we pretty clearly put the marker down in the sand. Not worth your time.
It's not.
And hey, before I give up the mic, I just wanted to issue a quick correction. This episode has not been published yet, but I noticed something from last week's episode that I got wrong. Before we get a flood of mail, I'm gonna put this out there. Johnny Cash's first singles with Sun back in 1955 were things like Cry, Cry, Cry and I Walk the Line, which is a fairly well-known song of his, right? It wasn't, I said it was Folsom Prison Blues was one of the early singles. That was incorrect. That came a few years later. So just want to make that clear that in those early days of Johnny Cash's life, as immortalized in the Joaquin Phoenix movie, he was doing stuff like Walk the Line. That's what came right after those early Elvis singles. Folsom Prison Blues was a few years later.
All right. Well done. Thank you, Rob.
Well, let's jump right into the album of the week, Thriller by Michael Jackson, a smash hit album. We're going to give some tweet-length reviews and tell you what we thought about this for the week. But first things first, Let's get a little bit of a childhood. It was pretty ubiquitous back in the 80s. Let's throw it around the room. I want to hear, how did everyone's week go? What did you guys think of the album? Throwing it first to Adam.
Fantastic week, dare I say it. But my quick review here is that it's November 1982. A 22-year-old Cal Ripken Jr. is named Rookie of the Year. A 7-year-old Drew Barrymore hosts SNL. I turned 2 years old. But most importantly, a 24-year-old Michael Jackson unwittingly releases a greatest hits album full of new material.
Okay. Phil, what do you got for us?
Man, I mean, I also had a great time with this record this week. I have been fortunate enough to really thoroughly revisit Michael Jackson's catalog a bunch over the last several years. I have a young child that was instantly smitten with Michael Jackson's music, specifically the Moog synthesizer era here, Thriller, Bad. That's not a tweet-length review, though, so I'm going to go with the great Quincy Jones when I'm going to say jazz is the top of the hierarchy of music. That is his comment on Thriller.
Not sure what that means in this context. But
All
okay,
right,
it's kind of a mystical sage. Well, first of all, I just want to say Happy Halloween, everyone. I know we're kind of
course,
pre-taping
yeah.
this, but it is an exciting and spooky day, hence why we're doing Thriller. My tweet-length review is this. Listening this week to such a sonically immaculate album has me wondering, why didn't someone tell Donald Fagen to include some hit songs on the Nightfly?
Oh, come on.
That is great.
Didn't he win a Grammy?
For the Nightfly, I don't know. I don't think so.
I thought he was at least nominated for a Grammy.
I think he may have been nominated.
Yeah. So this is Tom. I got a pretty succinct tweet-length review. Still not tired of it. I've heard it so many goddamn times. Still not tired of it.
Yeah, man.
I was
Yep.
like, oh man, I wonder if listening to Thriller this week is just going to get super old. I'm so familiar with so much of this. I'm really familiar with the hits. Not super familiar with the non-hits, which is what we chose to focus on this week, people. And
All one of them?
I'm not tired of it. It still works. It still effing works. So
I was going to say, I felt the same thing, that especially when we decided to not focus on the hits, I was a little concerned. I even made a joke about it at the end of last week's episode, that there were some clunkers on here, but the doggone record is better than I remembered.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm not trying to blow up our list here, but like one of the non-hits is a duet with Paul McCartney. That's like that's below the fold. You know what I mean? It's bottom half.
yeah, and deservedly so. By the way, deservedly so. It's that one's not a home run, but let's get a little bit of a background on the artist leading up to the album. He's Michael fucking Jackson. I don't know how much more I need to get into this, but we'll give you a little bit of run up here. He's Michael Jackson. He became a star at the age of 6. 6 years old, he became a star. I have a 6-year-old that still does not consistently wipe their butt when they poop. It is amazing to me that he was a superstar at the age of 6. It's kind of crazy. He put out 10 albums between 1969 and 1975 as the frontman of the Jackson 5. Then, between 1976 and 1989, put out a further 6 albums under the Jacksons as the band. Now, granted, his involvement in the later Jacksons albums became less and less as his solo career was taking off. But 16 albums between 1969 and 1989, plus all of his 6 solo albums, seven solo albums during that time. Incredibly prolific artist. It is one of those events in music. They refer to him as one of the first black crossover artists. He was the guy that made it so that the distinction between like the black records and the white records became a non-issue. It's like, who gives a shit who puts it out? If it's good music, it's good music. Michael Jackson became the king of pop. Now, how did he become the king of pop? Starting in 1972, he started putting out solo albums. He put out 5 solo albums between 1972 and 1979 when he put out Off the Wall.
How old was he in 72? Just out of curiosity.
At 72, Jesus. Yeah, what was he, 15?
Let's see, when was he born? He was born in 58. So in 72, he was...
14.
Yeah, 14.
Jeez, 14.
Well, he got discovered early on with the Jacksons. Jacksons 5 coming out of Gary, Indiana. Got on Motown. Basically, Quincy Jones was the sort of the prophet, man. He blessed them into the Motown world, and they started making hits. And I mean, goddamn it, Quincy Jones does not have the magic touch. We'll get that out of the way right now. Quincy Jones is an effing hit maker.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, let's not forget that he's been across multiple eras of music. He was the guy who told Frank Sinatra to swing Fly Me to the Moon and wrote that arrangement.
Yeah, seriously. You're going to be like...
He's been around. He's like, what is he, 180 years old?
Seriously. He's the guy who told Django Reinhardt it was okay to play the guitar with just 2 fingers. Like,
dude, he put out an autobiography, I want to say in like 2018. I did not read it. I did read a piece about it on like...
Very bombastic claims, if I recall, right?
Crazy claims. Let's not even go down that road, but just... across, again, a lot of different venues
genres
of life.
And ages. Yes,
okay, but like crazy claims from a guy who has verified craziness that he has done in his life. I'm going to give them a little bit more credence, you know?
Yeah. This dude has lived a life.
Yeah. And, you know, he's got the ear for talent. And there is nobody out there who will deny that Michael Jackson has a lot of talent. Let's just talk for a second about Off the Wall, the album that came out before this one, 1979. Off the Wall. 9 times platinum in the U.S. 9 million copies sold in the U.S. It is of a different era. It is a bit more in the disco era and a lot more of that, less poppy and a little bit more sort of disco sound to it. But you put out an album that goes 9 times platinum, and then you go on tour, and then you work on an album with your siblings, another Jackson's album. When you get ready to put out your next album, people are going to be pretty damned excited. And Michael knew that the pressure was on. Quincy knew that the pressure was on. You cannot put out another Off the Wall. You can't put out another One Foot in Disco album. You have to have something new. And apparently Michael went to Quincy and he said, and this is 3 years later, so 1979 to 1982 when they recorded this album. This is 3 years. That's a lot in the life of a very prolific artist. And what he said was, I want to make an album where every song is a killer. Every song's got to be a hit. And
damn close, yeah.
I mean, he did not achieve that, but he came pretty damn close.
Well, but as an ethos, let's stay on that concept for a second, because we all know what he's talking about. He was sort of saying, why does there have to be filler on an album? Why can't every song have the potential to be a single? Because in record industry parlance, it would be like, well, that's a single and that's not. His premise, I think, and I would argue he was successful with it, because as we listen to some of these
I agree.
lesser songs, they could have been singles for lesser art. Are they as good as Billie Jean? No, they're not. But that's besides the point.
There's a couple. There's one song in particular. I'll save it till we get there. There's one song in particular that I think fits in perfectly on like a sort of like 80s like R&B jazz station. Right, the same station is playing like George Benson songs, right? And we'll get there, but like, yeah.
If Bruno Mars released any of these lesser tunes today, they'd be mega
totally.
hits.
That's a fact.
You are correct. And honestly, that mentality is a little bit more in line with the current day musical mentality of, I don't have to make an album. I just have to make a hit song, and then I'll release a hit song, and I'll release maybe 2 or 3 hit songs. The album is almost inconsequential. Like, I feel like the album is dying as a format. We've talked about this many times before. People aren't unless you're into, lower tier indie bands or something, you're buying a vinyl. It's playlists, it's downloads, it's streams, it's all that shit. And so that is much more what people are into now. But he had that mentality. You're right, Rob. Why does there need to be filler? And so he hooks up with Quincy Jones, and they go into the recording studio, and they work on 30 songs. They put 30 songs down to try to find an album with those 30 songs. They end up selecting 9 songs to put on this album, but they record 30 songs. The recording process costs almost $2 million in today's money.
Well, as long as we're on the numbers part, because I read that to even get to those 30 they recorded, that Quincy Jones sort of perused 800 songs from various songwriters.
I saw the same stat. It was like top 10 things you don't know about Thriller, and it was between 700 and 800 demos that they churned through to narrow it down. Yeah.
Well, and then I heard that Michael Jackson said he had written 60 songs, and then I was listening to this podcast about it, another podcast, how dare I? And not only did he write around 60 songs, because he was a very prolific guy, as we just mentioned, but he would demo all those songs to get his ideas on the tape. That's how his creative process worked. And if you listen to some of those Michael Jackson demos, they already sound amazing. So a lot of work was already put in.
Yeah, the Billie Jean demo I've heard. It's like it's stupid, right? It's like this.
But like the original versions of those, he was not a multi-instrumentalist.
Sure.
He would do vocal takes of a lot of what the track should sound like. He'd be going, like, we should make a song that sounds like that. And it's like, yeah, that actually sounds pretty fucking badass. Like, we should definitely make a song that sounds like that.
This is some of the most interesting things I came across, is Michael Jackson talking about songwriting. I thought he had some really interesting comments on that and encapsulated some good thoughts on it for people that are interested. But one of the things he said that I liked, that I pulled out, was he said, I try not to invent, meaning to write the songs directly. I try to discover. I try to let it create himself. And because his voice was his major instrument, I think that fits, right? He just voiced through things, and he let his mind or his voice finish them, and that's how he wrote.
Well, it's that old, I think it was like a Da Vinci, maybe apocryphal Da Vinci thing from back in the day, where he talks about, like, I'm just trying to find the sculpture in the block of marble. Like, I'm not making a sculpture, I'm just taking away the excess. The
he releases the stone that's not, right.
Rob, you might want to timestamp that so you can correct that next week.
This is Michelangelo, you dope.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. But I'm familiar with the quote.
I have a different useless degree, not an art history degree. Okay. So, you're following up an album, sold 9 million copies, highly anticipated. So what do? They, as you talked about, they start sourcing just a shitload of stuff. Not only a bunch of demos, a bunch of different songwriters, a bunch of musicians. They really kind of throw everything at the wall to try to get a great album out of it. And we talked about it previously. The fucking the liner notes look like a Steely Dan album. There's so many different drummers, so many different keyboard players.
For the first time, looking at the list of the personnel here on the album, and it is lengthy.
It's all of Toto. Right, like Toto's the band.
Oh my God,
right?
Lukather's in it. Yeah, you're right.
Jeff Beccaro and Steve Beccaro and Jeff Lukather. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Eddie Van Halen.
Good.
Pay me scale. I didn't even get studio musician scale for the day that I came in to record the song.
We were on something recently together. I think it was the last podcast I taped where Flea came up.
Yeah.
I actually looked up. So it came up that he had played bass on
Mars
Bust
Volta.
a Move. Yeah, Mars Volta.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it came up that he had played bass on Bust a Move. I looked that up. He swears he got paid $200, and he fought them for years, personally, the guys who made all the money, and basically said at some point, I just gave up, lesson learned.
Yeah.
But he got paid $200 for Bust a Move.
So
you're saying Eddie Van Halen got nothing.
So Steve Lukather, the guitar player and the bass player on Beat It, he played both guitar and bass on Beat It. He was friends with Eddie Van Halen. He was like, we should get Eddie Van Halen to do this solo. And apparently Quincy Jones called Eddie Van Halen many times. And Eddie Van Halen would answer the phone and be like, hey, it's Eddie Van Halen. He'd be like, hey, this is Quincy Jones. He's like, I don't know who you are. Fuck off. And hang up the phone. And it took him forever to actually like take the call. And he was like, oh, you're that guy. Okay, yeah, I'll totally come in. And the story is that they come in and they had these two tiny little amps set up in one room, like little tiny, like 6-inch speaker amps. And they were just cranked to the fucking gills. And they put 2 6-packs in the room. And then over the course of 2 hours, Eddie Van Halen records the solo and also drinks 12 beers over the course of 2 hours.
I'm just picturing them leaving the beers like breadcrumbs into the studio, and he walks along and he cracks one and moves another 5 feet and drinks until he's in the studio. He's like, all right, we're doing it.
But that kind of tracks with these sort of like, you came in, got smashed, and walked out and never talked about money at all. It's like, yeah, well, now we got you on this song. Thank God it's not going to be a hit.
Yeah, this would have also been the height of Eddie Van Halen's powers, right?
Oh, yeah.
This has a really fun little nugget. We don't have to like dial it in, but at 2:45, you hear a bang, 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 right? You're banging on the door because Eddie's just smashed, right? And they're just like, this is it. Like, that's the one. That's the one. And then he just starts ripping. And that's the take that they kept. Had like somebody literally been like, play the guitar.
I know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, at least they kept it on beat, right?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. Dung, 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 dung.
It's hilarious.
So they have effing everybody on this album. It is the Paul McCartney is on this album. Freaking Paul McCartney is on this album. It is so highly anticipated. However, the initial reaction was kind of muted. There's a story about one of the engineers who was helping to mix it, because we'll take a step back. The process was that they recorded all these songs, they mixed all these songs, and then they brought it to basically like a session where they were listening along with CBS Records, I think that they were with, and they did like a listening session, and Michael Jackson leaves the room halfway through and he's fucking sobbing in the other room. And he's like, it's all wrong. It sounds terrible. I hate it. And Quincy Jones is like, you are absolutely right. I hate this. It is totally mixed wrong. We have to redo the entire album. We're going to redo all of the mixing. So then over the course of like October and November, they spend a week per song remixing the album. And they were like, we have to get it in stores for Christmas 1982. Like, we cannot miss Christmas 1982. Everybody is really anticipating this album. They apparently had guys on motorcycles sitting outside of the studio ready to take master recordings to private planes because they had all of the record factories that they could have on standby, ready to print the album. And like, he was like, it is so stressful. Like, you're literally, and they're like, are you fucking done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? They're like, no, we're not done yet. Like, just give us a little bit more time.
The 1 week of mixing per song is so insane and these are minimum 12-hour days, I'm sure. But the thing I heard too is that they were afraid of actually passing the tape through the head that many times. So they took the precaution of like bouncing out the rhythm section, which was already mixed, onto another master tape and setting it aside so that they could put it back in the final mix. Yeah. Because you're just going to play it out.
You don't want the degradation of the tape being like ripped through there so many times. Yeah.
And I thought this was, I heard this too. You maybe were about to say this, Tom, but it's not one of the songs we're covering. But I think it's a nice encapsulation of how the creative process works, which is they did 91 mixes for Billie Jean, and then they eventually went with mix number 2.
I was not going to say that, but that is a great factoid because, you know, this is something that if you have not experienced this process, it is hard to understand it. But when you are mixing a song and you are listening to each individual piece for so many times through, it stops being music. It turns into something else. And you're like, I have focused so much on the kick drum sound, or I focus so much on the bass sound or these backup harmony sounds. And you're like, I got it totally dialed in. And then somebody who hasn't been a part of the process listens to it and they're like, why the fuck is the kick drum so loud? Like, why did you do that? You're like, it stopped being music to me. It turned into this weird sound project that I didn't think about what an actual finished product was going to sound like. And it really is one of those, they say, like, you say a word so many times, like if you say the word like bowl 50 times in a row, it just loses all meaning.
It was in a Ted Lasso episode, and there's an actual word for it where it just your brain just interprets it as a sound, no longer as the word. Yeah,
and music gets like that in the mixing process specifically.
I find I think it's really interesting as well because again, people who might not be super familiar with the mixing process, is that you could record a guitar and you solo that track and it sounds like heaven by itself. Everything is fat and perfect. And then you throw it into a mix and it's completely wrong. So you have to simultaneously recognize the solo instrument as itself, but also completely change it so it fits in the mix.
Yeah, it's like a context. With guitar, yeah, it's a context thing, right?
With guitars, less is more sometimes. So you actually have to maybe cut out all of the low end. If you were to solo that guitar, it sounds terrible and tinny and high-endy and shrilly, and then you add it into the mix, and it cuts perfectly.
Well, can we add another thing that's happening in the mix? I totally agree with that. Yeah, but also the idea that the guitar, because there might be so many things going on, there are so many things going on in some of these songs, that they will also be deciding in the mix stage where and where not the guitar even goes. So that you'll hear in these songs, rhythm guitar just comes in for a third of the chorus and then leaves. And it's not to be heard again until you get back to that one specific part again. Yeah. And who knows how long the guy played.
He's in there doing the whole song.
Of course,
right?
Definitely.
Yeah, because if you listen and you've listened to that track in isolation, it sounds terrible. You're like, what is wrong with you? Why did you not fill this part out? This is not a complete part. You're like, well, there's actually 30 parts, and so everything can't be playing all at once. That would just be, as Phil, you said on the Mars Volta album, that would be sonic maximalism, which is often not the right choice. Yes.
Well, the one of the things I was thinking, since we're on the topic, is that this album, how do I put it? This, for anyone who is curious about what a very deeply produced piece of music sounds like, but maybe doesn't want to go into the classic rock genre as sort of over the Beatles, how dare you, or over Pink Floyd, how dare you. This is production class for the masses. Listen to this on good headphones. I know Adam always makes that suggestion, but in this case, I have to wholeheartedly agree. You will immediately start here, and I'm presuming that a lot more people just like and appreciate this music to begin with. But this is one of those ones where you're going to slap on those nice, decent headphones and maybe even close your eyes. You're going to immediately start hearing stuff you have not heard before, and you'll start to see a little behind the curtain of what we're talking about right now.
I want to just add, since we're staying in a very general, sort of like just talking about this record in a very general and sort of production way, I think something we haven't touched on here at all is, we sort of hinted at it, Tom did when he was back at Off the Wall, like this is a major, major shift for Michael Jackson and really for anything sonically. Like this was a new sound, right? And the piece we haven't touched on is the insane role of the Moog Model D synthesizer on this record. It is pretty much the only synthesizer you hear. It's all...
Really?
It's mostly one synthesizer being
wow,
played.
All those pads.
It's all
wow.
being... And it's a really... you think of synthesizers going back further, but like the Moog Model D is really the one that made the synthesizer, right? That's the one that was, in like... Emerson, Lake and Palmer, definitely later Pink Floyd records. So that came out in 1970. And when this came out in 82, right? So it's like, that comes out in 70. It would have started making appearances in prog rock in the mid to late 70s. But you're still out there. You're still in like synthesizers are weird. Devo, 1980, like this would have brought it more to the, and Oingo Boingo. And like that, it would have started to bring it more to the forefront. But like, and I'm not like a huge synth guy, but like, there's a whole other synthesizer world, right? Electronic world that's like participating in this. But like, this also is a very, very bold synth forward move that wasn't really present in nothing like this, right? Prior to this.
it's interesting because one of my notes earlier was like, how do you talk about Thriller? Thriller has defined sound since basically I was cognizant of the world. And it's like, how do I even think about a pre-Thriller, post-Thriller world? It's just like Thriller is just this immutable thing that has existed. And you're right, a big part of it was this incorporation of synth into very digestible and accessible pop that I don't think had existed before. Everything you're talking about is on the fringe of accessibility.
Totally.
Can I bring up, since you mentioned synth and prog rock, this is a fun little anecdote. I want you guys to pull up Spotify, and we're going to drop this clip in. But what Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson were listening to for inspiration was a prog rock album by John Anderson of Yes and Vangelis called Friends of Mr. Cairo. And specifically, there's one track on there, State of Independence, where they basically took inspiration for the Billie Jean.
It's got the synth bass, right? It's got that synth bass sound. Well, I mean, it's got more than that, but like...
Okay, so just a little weird anecdote about Billie Jean, because that synth bass line is very reminiscent of the Billie Jean bass line, and they acknowledged that, and I think they even talked to John Anderson about it at the time, and he was totally cool with it. But I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that synth was moving from prog rock and the weird score music of the 70s, epitomized by Vangelis, into pop music at that time.
I have a great factoid here.
Yeah, seriously. All right, so they're mixing the album, taking a shitload of time. They finally get the product. They get it to those motorcycle couriers who get it to those private planes who get it out to the record plants. One of the engineers says that literally he left the mixing session in LA and he gets back to London 2 days later, and there's a review of Thriller in the paper 2 days later. And the title is The Thrill Is Gone.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not a fan. Kind of a muted response to the album when it first dropped. It wasn't the seismic event, that bomb that everybody thought it was going to be.
Expecting it to be, yeah.
Then there were two things that changed basically the fate of pop music forever from there on out. And one of them was early 1983. There is a televised special showcase for Berry Gordy's anniversary with Motown. And they're like, all right, well, we're going to put on a performance. A bunch of Motown and former Motown artists are going to do a Berry Gordy tribute. And when they're playing it. And apparently he and Quincy Jones fought a lot about Billie Jean. He wanted the intro to be way shorter. And Michael was like, it has to be long so I can dance. That's why we need the longer intro. And he does the moonwalk, and people are like, what in the fucking hell is this? This is amazing. And the buzz starts around this album. And immediately people start buying the album, and they start realizing it's pretty damn good.
What a showman.
Awesome.
I mean, to think that's just
I got chills
badass.
hearing you go through that. I've never heard that. I didn't realize those two events were connected. And it makes me realize, Tom, that what with Ghost Beef having just come out last week, we need a dance.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
It's got to be the slicer. We got to do something like the slicer. Yeah.
I have a theory with the moonwalk. My theory is that it's all in the pants. There's actually a special cut to the pant at the knee, so you can kind of pinch the leg, disguising the motion of the leg. That's my theory on the moonwalk. So it appears the leg is moving less than it is.
I don't think the moonwalk requires theories.
I moonwalk naked all the time.
Have you ever seen anybody do it, though, other than Michael? Have you ever actually seen somebody do it and you're like, yo, he nailed it?
Michael Jackson didn't create the moonwalk. It was a guy.
James Brown?
No. Shalamaz Jeffrey Daniel. Shalamaz Jeffrey Daniel, a guy with a last name and then two first names for his two last names, created the moonwalk. taught it to Michael Jackson, and that was apparently like totally cool with him taking it. Michael Jackson called it the moonwalk, which is also a pretty fucking awesome name.
It's a great name.
Yeah,
it's a great
good
name.
on him. But, Phil, to your sartorial alteration theory here, Michael Jackson did have a patent for special shoes that he would wear on stage. He would have little nails put in the stage, and he had a shoe that he would slide onto the nail, and then it would stick the shoe there, so he could do that 45-degree lean.
That was later, though, right?
Yeah, it was definitely later. That was later. But Michael Jackson's an innovator in the world of dance. That's what I'm trying to get.
Yeah. But that actually shows consistency, that he realized, hey, it worked one time. Now when I put out bad, I need another new dance move to go with this.
Yeah.
And it worked again.
Yeah, because Bad sold like 19 million copies or something like that.
Yo, unpopular opinion. I think Bad is better than Off the Wall.
I actually would agree with you on that one. I
great.
like Bad.
Okay, good.
I like Bad.
It's because you're smart.
But let's stick on to reason number 2 why Thriller became immensely popular and Michael Jackson became an international superstar. And it was the music video. Now, there's a couple of different stories that go around about this. There's basically 2 versions of this story. One version is that, and this is Bob Pittman from MTV, says that he was like specifically putting out the call to black artists to make music videos because MTV, we've talked about it before, they had 250 music videos that were like, that was all that had been created at the time because they'd launched in 1981, 1982, 250 music videos exist. And that is like a day's worth of programming. And he's like, you just can't have a channel that is devoted to playing music with only 1 day's worth of programming. And so his account is that he said, hey, we really need music videos. And Michael was like, I could dance like a motherfucker. And people really liked it when I danced to Billie Jean. And so I'll make a video for Billie Jean. There's also another version where the president of CBS Records, Bob Niklov, called up MTV and said, if you don't play Michael Jackson's music videos, I'm pulling all of CBS Records videos from your catalog. And so screw you guys. Like, you have to play Michael Jackson. I don't know who I believe there, but I kind of can't imagine that they were like, we're not playing Billie Jean. What is this? What do you think this is?
Well, that's funny you say that because I heard sort of half of an anecdote. Sounds like the other half of the one you just said, that MTV was originally hesitant to put something that they didn't consider rock music into the rotation, and that was some of the pushback. But you also, I remember there was a famous YouTube clip from long ago from David Bowie in the 80s going on MTV and yelling at them for not playing enough black artists. I remember that circulating for a long time.
Yep. And so, I don't know who to believe. They're both very self-serving anecdotes here. So, and both of them come directly from the source of both these guys are like, no, I was the one who said Michael Jackson should make music videos. Like, I was the one who got Michael Jackson's music videos played. But it become a big hit. He puts out a music video for Billie Jean, puts out a music video for Beat It, and then he makes the music video for Thriller, which is a 14-minute video. Apparently, after it was released, MTV was playing it twice per hour, which is 28 minutes out of 60 minutes.
I remember I was watching MTV a couple years after this, and they were still playing it constantly.
I definitely watched the long form specials about the making of. Yeah.
Because I think what it really did, its impact cannot be overstated. It completely elevated the genre of music video to something other people would want to then go and partake of. It was a film. It was a short film.
And really. It was also like, it kind of had like a fun, it had a really fun, holding 2 mirrors up to each other thing where, he's in the theater with the girl, but then he's kind of in the movie, and then he's, he's back in it. It's like, what part is even, it's like, I was young. I was for me, it was a lot of, what even happened there? Wow, I'm confused. That's fun.
It gave me nightmares. I remember watching it when
I was terrified.
And it was it was the scariest thing in my life for a while.
So my kids like Michael Jackson a lot, and my youngest likes the song Thriller, but actually prefers a cover of it because
Kids Bop.
Yeah, because he associates the real one with the video, which he is horrified of.
It's pretty scary.
He saw it once for 20 seconds. Can't listen to the song.
Oh, there's some really serious makeup effects going on there. That is
It's like Walking Dead 30 years early.
yeah, totally. And we've talked about this. Like, there's no money for nothing if there's not Thriller. Like, there's no Madonna music videos. There's no Cherish. There's no any of those if there's not Thriller. I was talking to my wife, who was born in like late December 1983, after the album came out, and she has vivid memories of them playing the music video for Thriller like in grade school and being like, hey, check this out. She's probably like 9 years old. So that's 9 years after the release, and it's still a thing that people are playing.
What I recall about it was that even into the early 90s, when MTV's programming was still nearly 100% music videos, a lot of their programming would be countdowns of the best music videos. And it wasn't even a question of what was going to be number one. 100%
Perennial
of the
number
time.
one. Yes, exactly. No chance anything. Like, if you were to play the best music videos of all time right effing now, Thriller's number one. I defy you to name a better music video. Madonna's Express Yourself, maybe, but no. I still think Thriller is better than that.
But we did talk about it in the Madonna episode, right? Is that clearly some artists were a little forward thinking, and sounds like Michael Jackson was chief among them, perhaps, and the most forward thinking among them, perhaps, who saw MTV as an opportunity, as a leverage, and they took advantage of it, and they spent money on videos, and they spent time on videos, and it skyrocketed careers. Madonna was one such person. Michael Jackson, clearly another one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Thriller, the music video, massive success, credited as basically the savior of MTV. It is one of the reasons why that format became what it became. Let's do a little bit of Thriller by the numbers. This is not Michael Jackson by the numbers.
Up.
This is Thriller by the numbers.
Okay.
It's the best-selling album of all time. It has gone 34 times platinum in the U.S. That means it sold 34 million copies in the U.S. alone. 15 times platinum in the UK, 16 times platinum in Australia. Basically anywhere that they record album sales, it has gone multiple times platinum. It is insanity. At one point in 1983, they were selling 1 million copies a week of this album. They were literally like, they could not print them fast enough to get them into the stores. It was flying off the shelves. The funny thing is that no single on this album was actually the number one selling single of 1983.
Nothing ever hit number one?
No, it hit number one, but it wasn't the best-selling single of 1983. Best-selling single of 1983, Every Breath You Take by The Police. That was the number one selling single.
Okay.
Damn good song. Don't get
Challenge.
me wrong. But I got to think that part of that is because so many people bought the actual album and they weren't buying the single.
Right.
Maybe so.
So...
Well, also they released the Paul McCartney duet as the first single. That couldn't help.
They did.
It took the wind out of the sails there. Oh, man.
Yeah. I think that might be where the Thrill Is Gone headline came from. This solidifies Michael Jackson as the king of pop. And then he went on to have just an obscenely ridiculous career. I think Bad sold 19 million copies in the U.S. Like, Bad is also one of the top-selling albums of all time. And so, like, you got 9 times platinum in the U.S., for Off the Wall, then 34 times platinum for Thriller, then 19 times platinum for Bad. That's a pretty killer 3-album run right there. It does not get much better than that. They estimated that in 1989, Michael Jackson made $125 million from album sales and from touring. And that's 1989 money. $125 million.
Man.
So, we've talked a lot about Michael. We've talked a lot about the build up to this. We've talked a bit about the recording of this. We're going to start getting into some tracks. And what did we do here, people? Do you need to hear us talk about how Billie Jean is great? Do you need to hear us talk about how the Eddie Van Halen solo on Beat It? You do not. We're going to talk about the 5 worst tracks on Thriller. That is what we're going to do. We're going to jump in and take what I personally chose as the 5 worst tracks on Thriller. So if you have any complaints about which tracks we picked as the worst ones, you can blame it all on me. I think that these are the 5 worst tracks on Thriller, and we're going to jump in right away with the second song on Thriller.
I'll let somebody else talk about that modulation that they do.
I
later on.
love how those backup vocals are like mine, all mine.
Totally.
Kind of sound like synth.
Yeah.
Like they have a little, like the way that they're mixed and the way that they sit, it kind of sounds like a synth line, but it's clearly him doing a beautiful harmony.
And they're real tight. They got that real like Michael McDonald, like Asia, like they're like the notes are real close together, right?
Everything on this album is tight.
I know.
Yes.
I mean, spoiler alert, as if you haven't realized yet, I'm going to fawn over just about everything on this list of terrible five.
Before diving in, I had singled this song out as the one I remembered as being bad. It might be bad in relation to the super mega hits next to it, but it is definitely not a bad track. In fact, I was humming this on the way to sit down at my laptop for this call. It's a very successful song.
This song rips. This was the one that, like, when I came back to this record as an adult, this was the one that stood out to me as being like, really, if you had asked me to make a 5 best on Thriller, I like personal best, right? This would have been on my list. I feel confident. Yeah.
The reason I included it is because I feel like this is the most backward-looking song on the album. This feels a little bit more off the wall to me than it does bad. Like, this looks backwards a little bit more than looks forward. And it still has a little bit of that disco feel to it. Killer. I like disco. I got nothing wrong with disco. But at the time, I feel like this was probably one of those ones that people...
That's a fun comparison, because I do think, like, I totally agree with what you're saying, but, like, sonically, something about it is just so much more like it's coming off of a spaceship compared to Off the Wall. It's just all the synths. It's got the one, I like the synth. It's got the one that's hard panned, like right, that's sort of like a squiggly little single notes. And then it's got this other thing that does like these chords and it bends them. So cool.
So this song was written by Rod Temperton, who we talked about. They sourced so many demos for this album. However, Rod Temperton, who was a longtime writing partner of Quincy Jones, ended up writing 3 of the songs on this album, including the song Thriller. And so...
I thought this one was written by Jackson and McCartney, that they got together or something. You sure?
No.
I know Temperton...
Baby Be Mine? No. Baby Be Mine's a Temperton song. Jackson and McCartney is The Girl Is Mine.
Oh, The Girl Is Mine. I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about that song. All right, my bad.
No. We're talking about Baby Mine.
My mistake.
Mine, oh, mine.
They are kind of similar song titles, we have to admit.
They are.
They are. So wait, we're going to jump into it in a second, but you're going to defend The Girl Is Mine? 'Cause I'm looking forward to that part of the conversation.
I'll take the job of defending
It's
Girl Is
better
Mine.
than I had remembered. All I'm saying is that it is successful at what it's aiming to do. It could be a hit if, it could be a hit.
This song is a great example of something Rob had mentioned about rhythm guitar. So Steve Lukather, right? You could picture him in the studio and basically playing nonstop for 4.5 minutes. And when you listen to the song in the left channel, once every 5 seconds you hear a little ding-a-ding, ding-a-ding-ding. It's so sparse, but it's perfect. Yep. If he was just strumming the whole time,
this is not actually
way overboard.
Steve Lukather, though. This is a guy named David Williams.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking it was track 3. My bad.
Yeah. Come on, guys. Just get with the program here.
Right,
we're talking about Baby Be Mine, not The Girl Is Mine.
I know Baby Be Mine,
let's
but...
move on to track 3 just because it seems like that's where everybody's at. But before we do, what the hell happens in Baby Be Mine at 3 minutes and 33 seconds?
Holy crap, that modulation
Did we need it?
Defies...
Is that a modulation or is that tape magic?
I have no idea what
I think it's a modulation.
Transition chord. It's like you blink and all of a sudden you're a half or a whole step up and you're like, what the hell happened?
I think, yeah. And it's weird because I think Michael Jackson actually hits a lower note. It's like the note he's hitting in relation to the chords is different now.
Yeah, but half the time Mike is like stacked 9 times on himself, so he's hitting all the notes every time.
Yes. Agreed.
But here's, Rob, I would agree with you that right when it happens, you're like, oh, that's a fuck up. And then 2 seconds later, you're like, no, we're good. Like, we're right into it. Okay. Beautiful.
I like it.
I love it. Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, this is the song. I just think this speaks to the song. That as recently as 2019, this was being Quincy Jones sort of, project performs.
I mean, he's 89 years old. I kind of doubt that he's actually doing anything in the orchestra right now, unless he's pulling a Willie Nelson, which he might be, because he's a fucking vampire. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's just sitting backstage cashing checks.
Yeah.
It's true. You never know, though. You really never know, because McCartney's still out there rocking at 8. Didn't you just see McCartney on stage recently,
yeah,
Phil?
he was good. He was great, even. I saw him like 4 days before his 80th birthday.
Okay. But listen, the difference between 80 and 89 is pretty dramatic.
It's substantial.
There's a lot going on there.
But what about if you've just had baby blood pumped into your veins consistently?
Yeah. Or Quincy Jones, who's like pushing 90 and has like a legitimately hot young daughter, like in Rashida Jones. Like, and I'm not trying to be creepy about it. Rashida Jones is just beautiful and like my age. And I'm like, how old were you when you had her? Good Lord, dude. But we're gonna jump on. Let's just move on to the next song. The one that I'm actually the most interested to talk about. Tell me why it doesn't.
This song is actually not that bad.
I don't know, Adam. I think it kind of sucks.
Well, I think you're wrong.
You go fuck yourself.
You keep dreaming.
I don't believe it.
Talking in the midst of songs is not a good plan.
It's bad.
Generally,
No.
duet talking.
This is like sing talking too. It's very odd, very, very odd.
So there's a great anecdote from Steve Lukather and Jeff Beccaro. Steve Lukather is recounting this, that they play guitar and drums on this song, and apparently they get in the studio and they're like, all right, we're playing Paul McCartney. He's my hero. We're playing Michael Jackson. He's like the baddest guy on the planet right now. Let's get this song going. And apparently they get to the line, "The doggone girl is mine," and they both just start cracking up and like ruin a take.
Pretty
like,
hilarious.
what the fuck are you talking? The doggone girl is mine? Like,
That means someone wrote down "doggone."
Dog.
May have even looked up the spelling of it, wrote it down on a lyric sheet,
is that hyphenated?
and then it
What's
stayed
going on
there.
with that? Yeah. So apparently Michael Jackson, who is credited as the sole writer on this song, but we won't get too much into it, but there's been allegations that Michael Jackson takes sole writing credit on a lot of songs where it was much more of a group effort, and he is just sort of like, you should just be happy that like you get to be in a Michael Jackson song. So I'm just going to take sole writing credit and it'll be good for your career. Don't worry about the royalties type of thing. But either way, Paul McCartney clearly not worried about that. So Michael Jackson gets sole writing credit on this. Apparently, Michael Jackson never swore. He was like absolutely no foul language. And so when
that's how you know he's a good guy, kind of like Bill Cosby.
Of course, absolutely. Unimpeachable character.
Jehovah's Witnesses
Yes.
can do no wrong.
So apparently when he would want to say something was bad or somebody was like being an asshole, like if somebody was being an asshole to him, he'd be like, "Oh man, you're stinky, like you're stinky, guys." Or like when something was like shitty would happen, he'd be like, "Oh, that's real stinky." And so apparently he had the nickname of Stinky because like that was his big diss.
No. His nickname was Smelly. I heard Quincy
smelly,
Jones.
right, smelly, not stinky.
And he
smelly.
used it as a good term. He called when he really liked to groove, he called it smelly or smelly jelly. And then Quincy Jones started calling him that. And it's really creepy because I heard some
That is odd.
interplay between them on that. Yeah.
I did hear that it was when he thought things were bad. He said they're smelly, but yes, you're right. It was smelly, not stinky, and that was where the nickname.
Maybe
came
he
from,
just threw
smelly.
that word around generally. Unclear.
Possibly that was his like version of fuck. He's just like, this fits everywhere, right? Like,
It's getting creepier
smelling
the
song,
longer,
yeah.
the more we talk
Definitely
about
getting way
these
creepier.
words.
But so here's the one thing I want to talk about, the sing talking part. There's a clip that was going around the internet a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you guys saw this. It is Michael Jackson on stage in the early 90s in like Germany or something like that. And he starts talking to the crowd and he forgets to do the high voice. And he just talks like a normal guy. And he's like, "Yeah, everybody, we're going to start doing this." But then he's like, "Oh, well, oh, sorry." Like the affectation, the high voice is an affectation that he puts on. It was not his actual speaking voice, which is why the like, "Oh, Paul, I love her too. She told me she'd love me forever," is way creepier when you realize that he's doing this kind of like little kid voice.
That's crazy.
So continue to defend the song here, everybody. Let's go.
All right, so the bridge This is a fantastic bridge, and the fact that it hits at the 125 mark, which also means this song should end about 2 minutes early, because the last 3 minutes of it is just nonsense. But the bridge in this song is fantastic. I love where it goes. I think the bridge itself actually modulates and then comes back to the original key. So, Tom, I assumed you would like you. I know you're a bridge man. You like Carole King and her.
To the title track on the album, we played a little bit of it earlier. We're gonna dive back into it.
I mean, it's about as sweet as it gets, right? I mean, yeah. Love that bass line. The bass line, that like synth bass. I mean, this is the beginning, in my opinion, of this sort of synth bass 808 sound, right? Or you want me to tell you what sucks? This sucks. I hate this shit.
No, this song's fantastic. Just that like ba-doom at the beginning of the bass line.
Oh, and it's
great.
It has like the space landing synth on like one side. It's like, pew, it's great. It really does have like a spooky. It's like they knew what they wanted the video to look like before. Yeah,
it's very textural. I laugh when I hear this now and think about how Vincent Price, who at the time was a famous movie star, or not at the time, sorry, he was an aging movie star at the time, but this is almost certainly the only place people would recognize him in 2022, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
And that laugh that he does at the end, is as Vincent Price is a grandpa, if like his kids tell him a joke, does he laugh like that at it? It's the most sinister laugh I've ever heard. It really sounds like this man is about to murder you and it's just laughing over you as he does it.
Also, they make these ridiculous dog howls work. Like, they fire those things off through the whole song. Like, no, especially in the intro, they're just firing off dogs whenever they feel like. Wolves, sorry. Werewolves.
I think it's a very well written song by Rod Temperton again, a British songwriter whose other credits include the Michael McDonald hit "Yamo Be There." But
I don't even know that song, but it sounds terrible.
You never heard Yamo Be There? You should listen to Yamo Be There. It sucks. But it's a fun suck. It's a fun suck.
But, you can go and search. I recommend you go search. There's a lot of YouTube videos there's definitely one about this song that I watched, but probably a lot of Thriller, where they're going through the stem tracks, isolating the vocals or isolating a single vocal line. And just literally, there are 13 Michael Jacksons singing different notes that blend together into this perfect, crazy harmony throughout the song.
Yeah. That we talked about I talked about the bridge on the lead in where it's like, there's no escaping the jaws of the alien this time, open wide.
Oh my
That's
God.
That's like 37
that
voices and it's
so
amazing.
Good
Passage for your chord chart.
Is this in like a keyboard key? Is this in like A flat or like F sharp major or something?
I actually don't know.
I'm not sure.
We covered this in the Chop poorly.
No way.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How'd it go?
A lot of energy.
Yeah. A lot of energy.
Yeah.
It was for a Halloween show where we were all dressed in ridiculous outfits. So I think, Phil, you were Aquaman?
That was Aquaman.
And Rob was the Incredible Hulk with green body paint on.
Yes.
That is awesome.
It took so long for that green paint to come off my body. So many showers.
Yeah. James was the Silver Surfer. By the way, it's one of the funniest things is that we played this show. And then after the show that we were playing, this band Two Gallants was going to play, but they didn't tell us that they were going to play. So we were like a little salty about it. So we end up like rolling to this party.
I don't remember it that way.
I had dressed as the Punisher. So all I had on was a black t-shirt and jeans and stuff like that. But I rode to a party with James, who was the Silver Surfer, and he had like a bald cap and total silver body paint on. And it was not a costume party at all.
Oh my God.
It's like the most awkward, like rolling in like, hey, everybody. And we didn't know any of the people there. And it was just like, oh, because it was a couple of days before Halloween. It was not.
It was not on.
This
was like
Halloween.
The Friday or Saturday before Halloween.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yo, you know what's really dope about this song that doesn't get, any trash talked on it? Why doesn't the omnipresent cowbell in this, like, This doesn't get any of the like more cowbell jokes, but the cowbell's omnipresent.
Dude, until you just said that, it's doing the tuk, tuk, tuk,
Yeah.
tuk in the right. I'd never heard that until just now.
Yeah, you'll not.
Wow, man.
I mean, there's so much going on.
There's so many
so many things going on in this song. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is similar to aspects of Dark Side of the Moon,
sure.
where you listen to it. You've been listening to it for 30 years, and you put on a pair of headphones and you discover something new. Just like what Phil said, I heard an auto-wah guitar during the chorus doing this little counter melody off in the right channel. Never heard it before.
And you were just like, that's the bomb.
Just the gift that keeps on giving.
So, I mean, it makes sense, though, that mixed incorrectly, this could have been a mess. This whole album could have been a mess mixed incorrectly because there's so much stuff going on. You get everything cranked in the mix, or you get, it's a certain elements too high in the mix, and it's going to sound really jumbled, really muddy, and really terrible. This song, along with Billie Jean, people have pointed out that this was a turn in Michael Jackson's subject matter for songs to a more paranoid style of songwriting in general. Apparently, he was really struggling with fame and really struggling with being famous and being noticed. And then he put out Thriller and never was able to be a normal person again. But this is going to be this week's edition of Tom Tries to Justify Why I Got a Degree in English. There's the line where he's basically talking about nothing's going to save you from the beast with 40 eyes. Like, that's not a scary thing, a beast with 40 eyes, unless you're worried about constantly being under scrutiny and everybody watching you all the time. And, granted, it wasn't written by him, but I still think that I'm going to throw that out there, that was like a Michael Jackson struggling with fame thing. And then Billie Jean was apparently written because he had a problem with obsessive fans stalking him and, just being super weird, not letting him live his life. And Michael Jackson turned into a fucking weirdo. Everybody knows. And we're going to stay away from all the Michael Jackson is a pervert, weirdo shit that's out there. There's a lot out there. You can get that from some other source. But if you've been famous from the time you're 6, you don't have a chance of being a normal person in any way, shape, or form.
And then there's dudes like Quincy Jones who are like, you gotta sing your backups through this cardboard tube, or this can't be a hit.
Yeah.
Okay, I got a question. I'm glad that came up because
The timeless tube.
that is the timeless tube. Is that where we got that?
Totally where we got the timeless tube.
Okay, because he sings Don't Think Twice on Billie Jean through a long cardboard tube. So listeners, go and listen to that. It kind of sounds like it once you know that he sings it through a long cardboard tube.
Remember to always think twice. Don't think twice. She told my baby.
And we in our band The Chop back in the day, we were obsessed with the timeless tube. We thought it was a joke, but it was also serious that we were just trying to record everything in that kind of silly way.
Everything got a chance through the tube, right?
Yeah, everything got a chance for the timeless tube. Spoiler alert, none of it was actually all that timeless. The only reason it was timeless is because I was on drums. So. All right, before we move on,
Well done.
I am one who complains about long outros a lot and the lengths of songs a lot. I got to say, minute 30 outro of a 6-minute song, 1/4 of the song is outro, still fucking works. Way to go. You do you, Michael. It works great.
I don't want to drag on this song much longer, but do we know if they had envisioned the 14-minute movie when they were writing this? Like, did they? Because I think, or is that came afterwards, and then they went in and remixed and looped, and because basically you have to take the themes of the song and extend them out to a 14-minute movie. So they did that in post or like after the fact.
That was definitely not a decision that was made during the recording process of we're going to make a 14-minute version of the song. Quincy Jones was apparently arguing to cut time out of songs, and Michael was like, we need to keep time in so that I can have time to get my moves and bust a move here.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next song that we're going to do on our list, which is it's still pretty damn good.
Yeah, I mean, if I wrote this song, I would be like, yo, guys, how are you going to help me sell this song to somebody who's going to actually make some real money with it?
Yeah, I wrote, and this could be said of some other tracks on the record too, but it's so subtly polyrhythmic, and the percussion that's going on there is subtle, but it's got an African quality to it. But then there's all the other instrumentation is giving it counter rhythms. It's really interesting, but understated.
I like the way that the intro, I wouldn't have thought of it as a polyrhythm, so I think it's interesting that you've sort of pointed it out that way. But I like the intro and the way it seems so odd versus the rest of the song. And it sort of functions as almost like a bridge when it comes back. It's like this real stark change.
So you talk about this being really almost like covertly polyrhythmic. It makes sense. This is a Steve Porcaro song, but Steve Porcaro and Jeff Porcaro, the drummer from Toto, Steve Porcaro's the piano keys player from Toto, like they grew up playing music together. And so I am sure, Jeff Porcaro is an amazing drummer. And so I'm sure that sort of polyrhythmic sense was just baked into everything that he did. And apparently he tried to pitch this song to Toto for years. And they're like, nope. Not interested at all.
Really?
We're trying to do some rock stuff.
This could totally be a Toto song.
that's
Now that you say
100%.
that,
Yeah, because it does have a little of Africa in it, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, totally. But they were trying to go in a more rock direction, and they were not interested in this. And so he brought it to Michael Jackson, and I think it was a pretty good move on his part.
That's interesting. So I didn't realize that, because I was thinking of the connection of the African rhythms of African music, kind of referencing in my mind that, Mike, the first song on the album, "Want to Be Starting Something," which I think has this overtly African chant, right? That I think Michael picked up from some bit of African music. I'm not sure the whole provenance, right? So I was thinking of that, and that I'd heard he was influenced by African music at that time.
Yeah, and I don't know how much say Michael had in the instrumentation of these songs, but I don't think it was that much. But even if you don't have the knowledge to say, oh, you should play a different chord here on the synth or whatever, rhythm is so universal that I could see him being like, we got to insert some of these rhythms. But I think a lot of that did come from Jeff Porcaro.
It also seems really, really clear that the way his ears worked, like he didn't need to be able to play the keyboard to be like, yo, that's the wrong chord. That's the right chord. But also you're going to want to add this note.
right?
Yeah.
Like that seems like a conversation he was very capable of having, regardless of his sort of formal education on the topic.
Yeah,
I'd agree. Even for a low point, this is still damn good.
Speaking of low point,
there's some corny instrumentation,
we didn't
but
we didn't talk about that stupid low note McCartney hits on "Girl Is Mine."
Oh. The girl is mine. I think I made fun of that in my intro to the song. Well, do you want to talk about yet another, like, there's some creep factor lyrics on this album in general. The Girl Is Mine is definitely some creep factor. You're looking at it through the lens of like, well, maybe she should make the decision and you don't get to decide who the girl wants to be. But there's a line in Human Nature: see that girl, she knows I'm watching, she likes the way I stare. It's like, no, she doesn't. She definitely does not like the way you stare. Like, I get it, you're Michael Jackson, you're famous and everything like that, but yeah, that no girl has ever been like, that man is staring at me.
and I'm so turned on.
Yeah, at the most they're like, I wish that attractive man would stop being so creepy.
Tom, can you English major me on "you're a vegetable, they hate you, you're a vegetable"?
Yeah, I got nothing on that at all.
So
maybe
dumb.
I should have gone to more of my 19th century American lit classes or something like that.
I mean,
no, it's terrible.
But again, though, I mean, is that taken away from your enjoyment of that song at all, though?
It actually
hasn't.
It makes me enjoy it a little bit more because I'm like, oh, that's dumb and kind of like inoffensively dumb. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, it's great.
That was the Jehovah's Witness in him. He couldn't say anything mean, so he called people vegetables. You get the vegetable out of my house, you vegetable. What?
Well, I also like how the lyrics in the song are all entirely disposable, with the exception of the line, they tell me that is human nature. Because does he do me that way? Why? They tell me that is human nature. Why? Does he do me that way? that could just be nonsense, and in fact is nonsense a couple of times on the song. He throws in nonsense, da-ba-doo-ba-da. You don't even notice it. You don't even notice it. He's actually just throwing in nonsense.
Well, I mean, he's dropping chamois all over bad. I mean, it's like every 12th word. It's fucked up.
Yeah.
Chamois.
I believe it's pronounced Shemong.
Yeah, I always thought it was Chamong.
Yeah.
But oh well.
Anything else that we want to say about this song? Very pleasant song, but still one of my low points on the album.
I guess my only comment on this song, this is going to be an actual criticism of this record. I think this song would have been better served maybe being positioned somewhere else on the record. I just feel like, it's like the slow one, it's sort of like the refresher. It's like a bridge of a song. Maybe it could have been somewhere else. I don't know.
You know what? I will agree with you on that, because if they had moved this song to second to last on the album, you would have had in a row Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, Pretty Young Thing. And that's stacked.
That's a run. Damn. Yeah, it's a run.
But instead, they put Human Nature and then Pretty.
I said it sounded like a B-side off Stevie Wonder's Talking Book.
Oh, yeah, I get that too.
I feel like this was like a hedge. This is the song that I feel like if this whole album flopped, this could have been played on like R&B, like smooth jazz radio. And it no doubt did, right? But like this goes right against any George Benson song being released in 1983.
They were trying to corner the father-daughter wedding dance demographic there.
Before Luther Vandross came out.
Yeah, so there is something in this song. I think, let me get it's like basically when they come out of the first verse, the beat drops. The beat drops right around 1:30, and I swear, this is the genesis of Dick in a Box. Right here at 1:30. It sounds just like a Dick in a Box. Like it's like a right there. Can we get Timberlake on? Yeah, Timberlake, let us know. Right in.
Justin, text me on my personal number. You don't have to call my assistant. You just come right to me personally, right? I'm giving you permission.
This has some nice bass work in here. I will say that I do appreciate some of the bass work in here. I mean, it's not a standout song. I like it. It gets a little funky. It's a little long, but, MJ, you're MJ. Do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, it's Louis Johnson playing the bass on this song, and I would agree. It's good. It's organic, as opposed to a lot of the bass feel on this album being not organic. Louis Johnson is also the one who who played the bass line for Billie Jean and did quite quote unquote write the bass line for Billie Jean, but as Rob pointed out, that was kind of cribbed from another song anyway. Mm-hmm. My only note here is that you're telling me that you guys worked on 21 worse songs than this in this recording session. There were 21 worse songs than this.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
I will say this is interesting, just to maybe understand where the line is. There's a song called Carousel, which is on like the CD release of Thriller. It's like an extra cut, right? Because I guess they could get a little more material on there or something. It's like not even 2 minutes long, and it's fucking garbage. It's so clear why it's not on the record. Like if this was last cut, it's so clear why it got cut. So maybe I don't know why the other songs got cut, but yeah.
I like what you said, that they were thinking all singles, but not necessarily all singles on the same radio station.
Yeah. Well, it just, again, I feel like we're talking shit on some of these songs, and it's just in comparison, because it's really not that bad of a song. It's an inoffensive song. It's not a bad song, but you put it up against these heavyweights, and it just clearly is not punching in the same weight class.
No doubt. This is not Thriller or Want to Be Starting Something or Beat It.
You're sitting there on the same side with what might be the most successful single ever produced.
Yeah.
There's no way it's ever going to compare. Right.
Yeah. Are you talking about Billie Jean or are you talking about Beat It? Because they're both on this side. And I feel like Billie Jean was like the number 2 single of the year in terms of sales, and Beat It was like number 9 single of the year. But we didn't talk about this before. One of the interesting things, so this album won 7 Grammys. One of the Grammys that it won was Best Rock Vocal Performance for Beat It for Michael Jackson, and that was a big effing deal that a black artist won Best Rock. And that was the official, you have crossed over, you are dominating pan genre. Because I think Billie Jean won for Best R&B Vocal Performance. So he won for Best R&B Vocal Performance and Best Rock Vocal Performance in the same year.
Badass.
And Billie Jean is Beat It is definitely a rock song.
It's definitely a rock song. It shreds to this day, like the kind of slight hitch in that
It's a great riff. It's an iconic guitar riff.
Iconic. It's so fun to play, and you can't play it totally straight. You got to swing it a little bit for it to have the right feel to it. Absolutely killer. And I think that there is a strong case to be made that this is what officially just destroyed the color barrier in music and said rock fans like black artists, pop fans like black artists, R&B fans like black artists. Everybody likes artists for the art that they put out and not necessarily the demographic that they come from, because not long after this, we started getting hip hop coming through, and hip hop took a while to break through into mainstream popularity, but you'd be looked at with you'd be looked at like you were some kind of crazy white separatist nowadays if you're like, there should be a black artist Billboard chart and a white artist Billboard chart. Like, it's so antiquated, I think. But not at the time.
What was going on? Yeah, right.
They had just stopped calling it like the black charts and the white charts when they were like, it's the R&B charts and the rock charts. But they were the same damn thing, basically. It's just a different reskinning of the same concept. And he was the guy that said, fuck that concept. I am going to just make great music and everybody's going to love it. And they did. Now let's find out if we do. I think that, well, I'm in suspense here. Let's throw it around the room. It's time for our vote. Adam.
Yeah, Rob said something right at the top. He called this an immaculate album, and I agree. It deserves its spot in history. Sometimes pop fails to live up to musical standards, right? Like, it might be popular, but it might not have a lot of depth and complexity. This does. So from both a sales standpoint, from an artistic standpoint, a sonic standpoint, everything about this album, again, nearly perfect in my mind. So it's an obvious yes.
Obviously I agree with everything Adam said. I think this does an impeccable job of sort of not only pushing new boundaries, but also just being fun to listen to. It has crazy density from a musical standpoint. I like that word immaculate. Even right down to like the cover art, right? Doesn't like on the old LP, it would fold open. So it was like Michael Jackson laying there in like a white suit and like a black background. It's just everything about it is just like, just badass, right? Yeah. So this is obviously an easy yes.
Yeah, it's an easy yes for me as well. You cannot possibly call yourself a music fan and not give this a hard listen on a decent set of headphones. Do yourself that favor. For all the reasons that were mentioned, the density of the production, where you can keep discovering new things, the songwriting, how the songs unfold. We didn't really go deep on the most successful songs, but even the lesser songs, they still are constructed both from a songwriting perspective and arrangement and production perspective. And it's all in the context of pop. Like you said, it's fun to listen to. It's easy to listen to. It's easy to like. Absolutely listen to it.
I clearly agree, even though my vote at this point is just academic. I will agree with everything you said. I'm going to throw in one more thing. I think it still sounds pretty damn modern.
Yeah.
And if you were to play one of these songs right now, it hangs in there with anything getting put out by like Beyonce or anything getting put out by modern pop music. I think this still hangs with it. You throw Billie Jean up there, even if I didn't know it as Billie Jean, I would still be like, this song rips. It's super well produced. I love the throwback synth sound. This sounds great. This is fantastic. Who is this guy? Right? If I was some freaking alien or like living in a cave or like, one of the Sentinelese on that island off of the coast of India that has never had contact with the outside world, you play me this song, I'd be like, this is pretty damn good. This is a pretty good song.
It's a good pull on the Sentinelese there.
Yeah, thank you.
Search that Wikipedia article, audience.
I was going to say I'm going to Google that.
Yeah, they're that tribe that famously kills anybody who comes near.
Oh, I do remember seeing a story about that. Yeah.
Well, you know,
So-
yeah, because I agree, because that wraps back to something you said at the top that has had me thinking in the background, Tom, which is
It's
that
time to kill
so much of music since then has been based on this. Like, I found, you know, whether it's drum sounds or how to produce or how to make a tight rhythm guitar. I mean, God, did we not spend enough time on the rhythm guitar? Just all throughout this album is amazing. So crisp.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's meant to be a background. It's meant to just like lay in the background. It's so good.
We literally, 3 of the people on this podcast literally sang into a tube, into a microphone, because they thought maybe that'll make it good. Work for Thriller.
It takes a little bit more apparently, but
Yeah, there's a little more to it than that.
it still worked. So that's our final vote. Thriller. MJ, rest in power. He died, I think, just short of 51 years old. Kind of turned into a tragic figure later in life. Again, you can't ever be normal again after you make Thriller. And he was young. What was he, 24 when he put out Thriller? Like
Jeez,
26,
yeah.
something like that. Like, again, you can't ever go back to a normal life after that. And he hadn't had a particularly normal life living up to that. And he went from like being famous to being world infamous. Everybody knows who Michael Jackson is. If you go on like one of those, you know, eco poverty tours through Southeast Asia that some people like to do, where they're like, I'm going to go hike through the rice paddies or something like that. And you talk to people who live with their water buffalo and they are completely as far disconnected from your Western world as humanly possible. And you say Michael Jackson, they'll be like, Thriller? Hell yeah. Thriller's a damn good album. It is that popular. Good on you, Michael. You made some great art. Maybe made some questionable choices later in life. We'll move on past that and say you're on the list. If the list was
well
only full
done.
of good people, it'd be a very short list. So, do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Do you think Thriller has no business being on a list of 1001 albums you must hear before you die, because 7 of the 9 songs on it were singles and you could hear them in that format? You can let us know. Drop us a line, 1001 albumcomplaints@gmail.com, 1001 albumcomplaints@gmail.com. Let us know who you are, where you're listening from, and what you think about us. And if you like what we're doing, you can leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to this podcast on, or you can, more importantly, tell a friend that there are a bunch of dudes out there that like to get together and talk for an hour and a half about music, and then after the call is over, still talk about music with each other for, you know, probably about another 20 minutes before we realize we have to wrap it up. The only thing left for us to do is to get our homework assignment for next week. I have the Albinator here. It's going to be pretty hard for it to spit out another Stone Cold Jammer like it put out this week, but let's see what it has in store for us. Please, I'm going to give it a spin. So, drum roll, please. We will be listening to... The album is Hearts and Bones by Paul Simon. I'm familiar with Paul Simon. I have no idea what is on Hearts and
Yeah, I
Bones.
don't know that album at all.
I don't know it either.
Hearts and
Should be
Bones.
interesting. I mean, I generally like Paul Simon.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. You know what? I'm pulling up the track list on Hearts and Bones, and I don't recognize a single song off of here. So I'm actually pretty excited about that.
83, so right on the heels of this
Right
album.
on the
Or
heels
maybe
of this album.
November 83, so a year
Yeah.
after Thriller.
Yeah, year
maybe
after
it's
Thriller.
a bunch of Thriller-esque songs.
This-
It's a
when did- when
song
did-
about the
Heavy
moon.
synth.
I think that's a werewolf song, of course.
Just-
You know?
Is this right before, right after Graceland? Do you know when Graceland came
Would have
out?
been before.
Graceland.
Yeah.
Yeah. Graceland came out in, what, like 86 or 87 or something like that? 86. Graceland, yeah. So this is one right before that. If you look at the cover of this album, it looks like one of those like bumpers for
Still
Saturday Night
shots,
Live,
yes.
like that they would show right before.
Phil Hartman!
He is
And he
a-
looks at the camera.
He's a famous friend of the show. So
Yes.
Awesome. I am excited for that. I like Paul Simon. I think he's got a great voice and he's a good storyteller. So interested to see what everyone thinks about that next week. And until then, thank you for listening. I have been Tom.
I'm Adam.
I am Phil.
And I'm Rob.
Boosh!